The first punch landed so hard that the entire hallway went silent. It echoed, a sharp crack that bounced off lockers and froze every student in place like time itself had paused just to watch what would happen next. Aaliyah Johnson didn't even see it coming. One moment she was clutching her books, walking past the crowded hallway at Jefferson High, trying to mind her business like always, and the next moment her face snapped to the side as pain exploded across her cheek. Her books scattered across the floor, gasps filled the air. Standing over her was Madison Blake, tall, blonde, and smiling like she had just done something funny instead of something cruel. Her friends stood behind her, laughing nervously, not because it was funny but because nobody ever dared to go against Madison. Just before we get back to it, I'm curious to know, where are you watching from today? And if these stories have been keeping you captivated, be sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. You should have watched where you were going, Madison said, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve like she had been the one attacked. Aaliyah blinked slowly, her ears ringing, her vision slightly blurred, trying to understand how something so sudden could happen in the middle of a normal school day. "I didn't even touch you," Aaliyah whispered, her voice shaking but still trying to stay calm. Madison stepped closer. "Too close. Now you're talking back," she said, her tone dropping into something colder, something dangerous. Before Aaliyah could react, Madison shoved her hard against the lockers. The metal slammed loudly, making several students flinch, but none of them moved to help. Phones were already out, recording, watching, waiting. Aaliyah felt her chest tight, not just from fear but from something deeper, something she had been holding in for too long. Weeks of whispers, months of teasing. Years of learning how to stay quiet just to survive spaces where people like Madison thought they owned everything. But today felt different. Today felt like something was about to break. "Pick up my bag," Madison suddenly said, dropping her designer backpack right at Aaliyah's feet. Aaliyah looked at it, then back at Madison. "I'm not picking that up," she said softly. The hallway shifted. Something changed in the air. Madison's smile disappeared. "What did you just say?" "I said I'm not picking it up." This time her voice was stronger, clearer. And that was when everything exploded. Madison lunged forward, grabbing Aaliyah by the hair and dragging her down. Aaliyah screamed as she hit the floor, her hand scrambling for balance while Madison raised her hand again, ready to strike harder this time. "Say it again," Madison yelled. The crowd grew louder now, not stopping it, just reacting like it was some kind of show. But then Aaliyah stopped struggling, she stopped shouting, she went still. And slowly, with trembling fingers, she reached into her pocket. Madison hesitated for just a second, confused. "What are you doing?" Aaliyah pulled out her phone. Her breathing was uneven, her cheeks swollen, her hands shaking, but her eyes had changed. They were no longer scared, they were focused. She dialed a number. Madison laughed. "Oh, you calling for help now? Who you gonna call, the principal?" she mocked. Aaliyah didn't answer. The phone rang once, twice, then someone picked up. Aaliyah swallowed, her voice low but steady as she spoke into the phone. "I need you." Was a pause. A silence so deep it felt like even the hallway stopped breathing again. Then Aaliyah added one more sentence. "She put her hands on me." The line went quiet for half a second, and then a voice came through the speaker, calm, soft, but carrying something powerful underneath. "Stay where you are," her mother said. Madison rolled her eyes. "What is she gonna do? Come bake cookies?" But Aaliyah didn't move. She didn't speak again. She just ended the call and slowly got to her feet, wiping blood from the corner of her lip. Then she looked straight at Madison. And for the first time, Madison felt something she had never felt before, uncertainty. Because Aaliyah didn't look scared anymore, she looked like she was waiting. And far outside the school building, just pulling into the parking lot, a black car door opened. A woman stepped out, calm, composed, dressed simply. But as she closed the door, the air around her seemed to shift. Because this wasn't just any mother. And whatever was about to walk into that school was about to change everything. By the time the black car door shut, the energy inside Jefferson High had already started to change, even though most students didn't know why. Aaliyah stood in the hallway, her back still against the lockers, her chest rising and falling slowly as she tried to steady her breathing. Her cheek throbbed with pain, her lips stung, and her scalp still burned where Madison had grabbed her, but none of that showed in her eyes anymore. The fear that once lived there had been replaced by something quieter and far more dangerous, patience. Madison, on the other hand, shifted her weight slightly, trying to shake off the strange feeling creeping into her chest. She folded her arms, forcing a smirk back onto her face as her friends whispered behind her, "Why are you just standing there?" Madison said, her voice louder now as she tried to regain control of the moment. "You think calling your mommy is gonna save you?" Aaliyah didn't respond. That silence bothered Madison more than any words could have. "Answer me," Madison snapped, stepping forward again, but this time Aaliyah didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't even blink. That's when a voice cut through the hallway. "All right, what's going on here?" It was Mr. Daniels, one of the teachers, rushing over after hearing the noise. His eyes darted between Aaliyah's bruised face and Madison's clenched fists, and his expression tightened instantly. "What happened?" he demanded. Nobody spoke, not the students holding their phones, not Madison's friends, not even Madison. Aaliyah finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "She attacked me." Madison scoffed immediately. "That's not what happened. She bumped into me and started acting crazy." Daniels frowned. "Both of you come with me to the office. Now." Crowd slowly began to break apart, students whispering as they walked away, but many stayed just far enough to watch what would happen next. Moments like this didn't happen every day, and nobody wanted to miss the outcome. As Mr. Daniels started guiding them down the hallway, Aaliyah glanced toward the front entrance of the school. She knew her mom was already here, and somehow that made every step feel lighter. Madison noticed the look. "What are you smiling about?" she muttered. Aaliyah didn't answer. Inside the main office, the air felt different, quieter, tense. The school secretary looked up in shock as the three of them walked in, her eyes immediately locking onto Aaliyah's face. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, "Mr. Daniels spoke quickly. "We need the principal, now." As they waited, Madison leaned closer to Aaliyah, lowering her voice so only she could hear. "You really think this is over?" she said. "You just made it worse for yourself." Aaliyah turned her head slowly. She said softly, "You did." Before Madison could respond, the office doors opened again. And that's when everything changed. The room went quiet, not the kind of quiet from fear, the kind of quiet that comes when something powerful enters a space. A woman walked in, her steps steady, her posture straight, her face calm but unreadable. She wasn't dressed flashy, no expensive jewelry, no loud presence, but somehow every person in that room felt her before they even understood why. Her eyes went straight to Aaliyah. And the moment she saw her daughter's face, something shifted, not outwardly, not in a dramatic way, but inside her, deep and controlled. Aaliyah stood up immediately. "Mom." The woman stepped forward, gently placing her hand under Aaliyah's chin, turning her face slightly to examine the swelling and the cut on her lip. Her touch was soft, careful, but her eyes told a completely different story. "Who did this?" she asked quietly. Aaliyah didn't hesitate. She pointed straight at Madison. The room seemed to shrink. All eyes turned. Madison felt it this time, really felt it, as the woman's gaze moved from Aaliyah to her. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it was intense. Too intense. For the first time since this started, Madison's confidence cracked just a little. "She's lying," Madison said quickly, forcing her voice to stay steady. Be quiet," the woman said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't step forward. But the command in those two simple words was so strong that Madison's mouth closed instantly before she even realized it. Mr. Daniels blinked in surprise. The secretary froze. Even the principal, who had just walked out of his office, stopped mid-step as he took in the scene. The woman finally spoke again, her voice still calm, still controlled. "My name is Aaliyah Johnson," she said. "And before anyone says another word, I want to hear exactly what happened." Was something about the way she said it that made it clear this wasn't just a conversation. It felt like a test. And somehow, everyone in that room knew someone was about to fail. The silence in the office stretched so long it began to feel heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting to hear what would be said next. Aaliyah Johnson didn't move. She stood beside her daughter, one hand resting gently on Aaliyah's shoulder, but her presence filled the room in a way that made even the adults feel slightly out of place. Her eyes remained locked on Madison, not blinking, not wavering, just watching. Madison swallowed. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. "I said I want to hear exactly what happened," Aaliyah repeated, her tone still calm but now carrying a sharper edge. The principal cleared his throat, stepping forward as if to regain control. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand you're upset, but we have a process." Aaliyah didn't even look at him. "With respect," she said, her voice polite but firm. My daughter was attacked. So yes, we will follow your process, right after I hear the truth. That shut him up. Mr. Daniels shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Madison and Aaliyah. I arrived after it started, he admitted. But it looked physical when I got there. Looked? Keisha asked, finally turning her gaze toward him. He hesitated. Aaliyah was on the floor. Madison was standing over her. The room seemed to tighten again. Keisha nodded slowly, absorbing every word, then turned her attention to the students lingering by the office door, some of them still holding their phones. You, she said, pointing to a boy in a hoodie. Did you see what happened? The boy froze. Everyone turned to him. I mean, he stammered, glancing nervously at Madison. Madison shot him a look, a warning, but then he looked back at Keisha, and whatever he saw in her eyes made him choose differently. She started it, he said quickly. Madison did. Aaliyah was just walking and then, he gestured awkwardly, she hit her. A murmur spread through the room. Madison's face hardened. That's not true. Voice spoke up, a girl this time. It is true, you grabbed her first, then another, and you threw her down. You told her to pick up your bag. The truth was spilling now, one voice after another, not loud, not dramatic, but enough, more than enough. Madison's composure began to crack piece by piece as the weight of the room shifted against her. You're all lying, she snapped, her voice rising slightly. All of you. No, Keisha said softly, and just like before, that one word cut through everything. The room went quiet again. Keisha took a slow step forward, not aggressive, not rushed, but deliberate. You're not used to being told no, are you? She said, her eyes still locked on Madison. Madison tried to hold her ground, but something about Keisha's presence made it feel like standing on unstable ground. You don't get to walk around hurting people and then decide what the truth is, Keisha continued. That's not how the world works. Laughed, but it sounded forced. And what are you gonna do about it? That question hung in the air. For a second it seemed like everything paused again. Then Keisha smiled, not a warm smile, not a friendly one, a knowing one. I don't have to do anything, she said, and that confused Madison more than anything else. Before she could respond, Keisha reached into her bag and pulled something out, her phone. She tapped the screen once, twice, then turned it toward the principal. I believe your school has a strict policy on violence and bullying, she said. The principal nodded slowly. Yes, of course. Good, Keisha replied. Then you'll want to see this. She pressed play. A video began to roll, clear, steady, every moment, from the first shove to the punch to Aaliyah hitting the floor, every angle, every sound, every word. The entire office leaned in as the truth played out right in front of them. There was no denying it now, no twisting it, no escaping it. When the video ended, the silence that followed was different, heavier, final. The principal exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. Madison, is this accurate? Madison didn't answer. She couldn't. For the first time, she had nothing. Keisha stepped closer, just enough for her presence to be felt again. This is the part where you realize something important, she said quietly. Madison looked up at her. And what's that? She muttered. Keisha's eyes didn't soften. You picked the wrong person. A chill ran through the room. But before anyone could process those words fully, Keisha added something that made it even worse. And you haven't even met me yet. The warning wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening, but it carried something far deeper than anger, something controlled, something trained. And as Madison stood there, unable to respond, one thought crept into her mind for the very first time. This wasn't over, not even close. The principal adjusted his glasses, his hand slightly unsteady as he placed Keisha's phone down on his desk. The evidence had spoken louder than anyone in the room ever could. And now, the weight of responsibility sat squarely on his shoulders. Madison Blake, he began, his voice firm but careful, based on what I've seen, this is a serious violation of school policy. Physical assault, intimidation, and harassment are not tolerated here. Madison stood frozen, her arms no longer crossed, her confidence drained into something brittle and uncertain. She glanced toward her friends, but none of them met her eyes this time. Effective immediately, the principal continued. You are suspended pending further disciplinary review. A sharp gasp came from the secretary. Madison's head snapped up. What? You can't be serious. I am very serious, the principal replied. And given the severity, this may escalate to expulsion. That word hit hard. Expulsion. For the first time, real fear flashed across Madison's face. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice rising again as she tried to grab onto whatever control she could find. "It was just a fight." "No," Keisha said calmly, "it was." Madison turned toward her, frustration boiling over. "You don't even know what you're talking about." Keisha took one slow step closer. Again, not aggressive, but intentional. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," she said, "because this didn't start today." The room shifted again. The principal frowned. "What do you mean?" Aaliyah hesitated. Her fingers tightened slightly against her side. Keisha looked at her gently. "Tell them." Aaliyah took a deep breath. "She's been bothering me for months," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "Calling me names, pushing me in the hallway, messing with my locker. I just didn't say anything." "Why not?" Mr. Daniels asked, his tone softer now. Aaliyah looked down for a second before answering. "Because nobody ever does anything." That truth landed heavy. No one argued. No one interrupted. Because deep down, they knew she was right. Keisha nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Silence protects the wrong people," she said, "and today that silence broke." Madison shook her head, trying to push back. "Oh, please, she's just trying to make herself look like a victim." But her words didn't carry the same weight anymore. Not after the video. Not after the witnesses. Not after the truth had already been laid out. The principal sighed, clearly overwhelmed. "We will be contacting both families and proceeding according to district policy. This is no longer just a school matter." That sentence changed everything. Madison's confidence collapsed completely. "You're calling my parents?" she asked, her voice dropping. "Yes," the principal said firmly. For a brief moment, Madison looked small. Not powerful. Not untouchable. Just a teenager who suddenly realized actions had consequences. Keisha turned slightly toward Aaliyah. "Go sit down, baby," she said softly. Aaliyah nodded and moved to a chair, her body finally relaxing just a little now that someone was standing fully in her corner. But Keisha didn't sit. She remained standing. Still. Calm. Watching. And then Madison, desperate to reclaim some kind of ground, let out a short, bitter laugh. "You really think you did something today?" she said, her tone shaky but still trying to sound tough. "You think this is over?" Keisha looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, there was a faint hint of something deeper in her expression. Not anger. Not fear. But something like disappointment. "This was never about winning or losing," Keisha said. "This was about stopping something before it becomes who you are." Madison frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Keisha didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly removed her jacket, folded it neatly, placed it on the back of a chair. The simple action caught everyone's attention. Even the principal blinked in confusion. "Mrs. Johnson," he started. But Keisha raised a hand slightly. "Relax," she said calmly. "I'm not here to cause a scene." Then she turned her attention back to Madison. "You asked me earlier what I was going to do," she said. Madison's chest tightened slightly. Keisha stepped forward once more, her movements smooth, controlled, almost effortless. "I believe in teaching lessons," she continued. "Real ones, the kind that stay with you long after the moment is over." Madison tried to scoff again, but it didn't come out right. It sounded weak. "Yeah, and what lesson is that?" she muttered. Keisha tilted her head slightly. "The kind that shows you the difference between power and control." The room went still. Because suddenly the way Keisha stood, the way she moved, the way she spoke, it didn't feel ordinary. It felt trained, disciplined, dangerous in a way that didn't need to be loud. Mr. Daniels leaned closer to the principal, whispering, "There's something different about her." The principal nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on Keisha. And then, without raising her voice, without making a big show of it, Keisha said something that sent a quiet shock through the room. "I've spent over 20 years mastering discipline," she said. "Not for fighting, but for moments like this." Madison swallowed again. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper now. Keisha's gaze sharpened slightly. "I'm talking about control," she said, "the kind you clearly don't have yet." And just as the tension reached its peak, just as it felt like something bigger was about to happen, the office door suddenly burst open. A loud voice filled the room. "Madison!" Everyone turned. A tall man stormed in, his face red with anger, his presence loud and overwhelming. Madison's father had arrived. And the moment his eyes landed on Keisha, everything was about to shift again. The room changed the moment Madison's father stepped inside. His presence was loud in a way that didn't need shouting, but he was shouting anyway. His expensive suit, his sharp watch, the confidence in the way he walked, it all screamed power, the kind of power that usually made problems disappear before they even had a chance to grow. "Madison," he barked again, striding across the office. "What is going on here?" Madison rushed toward him like a lifeline. "Dad, they're trying to suspend me over nothing. She pointed at Aaliyah, is lying." Her father didn't even look at Aaliyah at first. His attention went straight to the principal. "I got a call saying my daughter assaulted someone. I hope that's not what you're suggesting." Principal straightened, trying to hold his ground. "Sir, we have video evidence and multiple witnesses." "I don't care about witnesses," the man cut in sharply. "Kids lie. They exaggerate. That's what they do." His dismissive tone filled the room, making the tension even thicker. Then, slowly, his gaze shifted, first to Aaliyah. He barely looked at her, then to Keisha, and he paused just for a second, because unlike everyone else in the room, Keisha didn't react to his energy. She didn't shrink, didn't speak, didn't interrupt. She simply stood there, calm, steady, watching him like she already understood exactly who he was. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone less aggressive now, more curious but still edged with authority. Keisha met his eyes. "I'm her mother." A brief silence followed, then he gave a short nod. "All right. Then I'm sure we can handle this like adults." Keisha didn't respond. That made him slightly uncomfortable. He turned back to the principal. "So here's what's going to happen. We're not rushing into any decisions. No suspension, no record, nothing that affects my daughter's future. We'll review things properly." Principal hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, we already have." "I said we'll review it," he repeated, more firmly this time. The room felt like it was tilting in his favor. Like it always did, like it always had. Madison slowly began to regain her confidence, standing taller beside him, her earlier fear fading as she leaned into the protection she was used to. But then Keisha spoke. No, wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it stopped everything. Madison's father turned slowly. "Excuse me." Keisha took a step forward, her posture still relaxed but unshakable. "You don't get to walk in here and rewrite what already happened." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not rewriting anything. I'm making sure this is handled correctly." "It is being handled correctly," Keisha replied. "You just don't like the outcome." That hit harder than anything else had. The room went silent again. Madison's father studied her now, really studied her, as if trying to understand why she wasn't backing down like everyone else usually did. "You don't seem to understand how these situations work," he said slowly. "There are procedures, there are discussions, there are ways to resolve things without ruining a child's future." Keisha nodded once. "You're right." He relaxed slightly, thinking she was agreeing, but then she continued. "One of those ways is teaching your child that actions have consequences before the world teaches them in a much harsher way." That wiped the calm right off his face. "Daughter is not the problem here," he said sharply. Keisha tilted her head just slightly. "Then why is she the one in the video?" That question hung in the air like a weight nobody could lift. For a brief moment he had no answer, none, and everyone in the room felt it. Madison shifted beside him, her fingers tightening slightly as the confidence she had just regained started slipping again. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, turning back to the principal. "You're going to discipline my daughter based on a hallway incident. Kids fight. It happens." "No," Keisha said again, her voice still calm but now carrying more weight. "Kids don't get attacked and told to pick up someone's bag like they're nothing. That's not a fight, that's bullying." The word landed hard, bullying. It changed the tone completely. The principal nodded slowly. "She's right." Madison's father exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated now. "So what do you want?" he asked, turning back to Keisha. "An apology? Fine." Madison, apologize. Madison froze. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, the words rushed, empty, forced. Keisha didn't even look at her. "An apology without understanding is just noise," she said. That stung more than shouting would have. Madison's father's patience began to wear thin. "Then what exactly are you asking for?" Keisha finally stepped closer, close enough that her presence felt undeniable. "Not asking for anything," she said quietly. "I'm making sure this doesn't happen again." "How do you plan to do that?" he challenged. Keisha's eyes held his, steady and unflinching. "By teaching something you clearly haven't." The room went still, because now this wasn't just about Madison anymore. This had become something else entirely, something deeper, something personal. Madison's father let out a short, humorless laugh. "You think you can teach me something?" Keisha didn't smile, didn't react, she just said one thing. Somehow, the way she said it made the air feel heavier than before, because for the first time since he walked in, he wasn't entirely sure he was in control anymore. And deep down, something told him, this woman wasn't bluffing. "Just before we get back to the story, I'm curious, where are you watching from today? And if you're enjoying this journey so far, make sure you're subscribed for more stories like this." The air inside the office felt tighter than ever, like the walls themselves were closing in on the tension that had taken over the room. Madison's father stood still, staring at Keisha, trying to read her, trying to understand why she wasn't reacting the way people usually did around him. He was used to control, used to pressure bending situations in his favor, used to people stepping back the moment he stepped forward. But Keisha hadn't stepped back once, not even an inch. "You're very confident," he said slowly, folding his arms as if trying to rebuild his authority. "But confidence doesn't change reality." Keisha nodded slightly. "You're right," she said, "but truth does." That answer landed clean, too clean. He exhaled through his nose, clearly irritated now. "All right," he said, glancing briefly at the principal before returning his attention to her. "Let's stop going in circles. What exactly do you think you're going to teach here? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a simple school issue that's being dragged into something unnecessary." Keisha's expression didn't change. "Nothing about this is simple," she replied. "What happened today is the result of something that's been allowed to grow." Shifted beside her father, her voice smaller now. "Dad, can we just go?" But he didn't move. He couldn't, not yet, not when he felt like he was losing ground. Keisha continued, her voice steady, almost quiet, but every word carried weight. "When someone hurts others repeatedly and faces no real consequences, they start believing they're untouchable. And when that belief settles in—" She paused slightly. "It becomes part of who they are." The room stayed silent. Even the principal didn't interrupt, because this no longer felt like a typical school discussion. It felt like something deeper, something uncomfortable. Madison's father shook his head, trying to push back against the truth in her words. "You're overanalyzing this. She's a kid. Kids make mistakes." "Yes," Keisha said calmly. "They do." For a moment, it sounded like she agreed again. But then she added, "And that's exactly why those mistakes need to be corrected early." That hit differently, stronger. Madison looked down at the floor, not defiant, not angry, just quiet. And for the first time, it wasn't because she was being watched. It was because she was thinking. Keisha noticed. She turned her attention slightly toward her, her tone softening just a little. "Look at me," she said. Madison hesitated, then slowly she did. Keisha didn't step closer this time. She didn't need to. "Do you know why you felt comfortable doing what you did today?" she asked. Madison didn't answer. Keisha continued. "Because no one ever showed you what real strength looks like." Madison frowned slightly, confused. "My strength is fine," she muttered weakly. Keisha shook her head gently. "No. What you showed today wasn't strength. It was lack of control." The word control echoed again. It had come up before, and now it felt even heavier. Madison's father scoffed quietly. "Control? You're making this sound like some kind of training lesson." Keisha turned her head slightly toward him. "It is." That answer caught him off guard. He asked. Keisha finally moved again, slow and deliberate, positioning herself in the open space of the office as if she was about to demonstrate something. But her movements remained calm, respectful, never threatening. "I've spent years studying discipline," she said. "Not to fight people, but to understand people. To understand reactions, emotions, impulses." She glanced at Madison, especially the ones that cause harm. The room was completely still now. No one spoke. No one moved. Keisha raised one hand slightly, not in a threatening way, but as if illustrating a point. "When someone pushes you," she said, "your first instinct might be to push back. When someone challenges you, your instinct might be to prove dominance." Madison listened, without realizing it. "But real strength," Keisha continued, "is being able to stop yourself before you cross a line you can't come back from." Swallowed, because suddenly she could see it, that moment in the hallway, that choice, that line. And how easily she had crossed it. Keisha lowered her hand. "That's what you don't have yet," she said, "and that's what needs to change." Madison's father shifted uncomfortably, his confidence now clearly shaken. "So what, you're going to stand here and lecture us until we agree with you?" Keisha shook her head. "No," she turned slightly toward the principal. "The school will handle the consequences, that's their responsibility." Then she looked back at Madison. "But understanding, that's yours." Words were simple. But they carried something deeper than punishment, something that couldn't just be handed out or written on paper. Madison's voice came out quieter than anyone expected. "Why do you even care?" she asked. "I hurt your daughter, shouldn't you just want me punished?" That question lingered, and for the first time Keisha's expression softened in a real way. "I care," she said, "because if no one corrects you now, one day you'll do something you can't undo." The room felt heavier again, not with tension this time, but with truth. And just as it seemed like everything had settled into that moment, the principal's phone rang loud, sharp, breaking the silence. He answered quickly, his expression shifting as he listened. "I understand, we'll be ready." He hung up slowly, then looked at everyone in the room. "There's been a development," he said. All eyes turned to him. "The district office is getting involved," he continued. "And they're sending someone here right now." Madison's father frowned. "For what?" The principal hesitated for just a second before answering. "To review the case and determine if further action is required beyond the school." That changed everything again, because now this wasn't just a school issue, and whatever came next was going to be bigger than all of them. The words hung in the air like a storm warning no one could ignore. Beyond the school. Madison's father straightened immediately, the shift in his posture sharp and defensive. "That's not necessary," he said quickly. "This is being blown way out of proportion." Even he didn't sound as confident as before, because now this wasn't something he could control with a firm voice or a strong presence. This was bigger. The principal remained calm, though the tension in his face was clear. "Sir, once the district steps in, it's out of our hands. They'll review everything, including the video, the witness statements, and decide the next steps." Madison's fingers tightened at her sides. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "It means," the principal said carefully, "this could move beyond school discipline. Depending on their findings, it may involve formal reports." The room went still again. Formal reports. That sounded serious, too serious. Madison looked at her father, her eyes searching for the same confidence he always had, the same assurance that everything would be handled, fixed, erased. But this time, it wasn't there. He didn't answer right away. And that silence said everything. Aaliyah watched from her chair, her hands resting in her lap, her breathing steady now. For the first time since everything started, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, not fear, not anger, relief. But even that relief was mixed with uncertainty, because whatever was coming next was unknown. Keisha stood beside her, still composed, still grounded, as if she had already accepted whatever outcome would come. Madison finally spoke again, her voice smaller than it had ever been. "Dad, am I in trouble?" That question hit differently than anything else. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't arrogant. It was honest. Her father looked at her, really looked this time, and for a moment something shifted in his expression. Not power, not control, concern, real concern. "We're going to figure this out," he said, but the certainty in his voice had cracks now. Keisha watched quietly, then she spoke. "This is the moment," she said. Everyone turned toward her again. The moment where things can go one of two ways. Madison frowned slightly. What do you mean? Keisha took a slow breath before answering. You can keep fighting the truth, she said, blaming others, avoiding responsibility, and let this situation grow into something bigger. Her words were calm, but each one landed with precision. She continued, you can face it, own it, learn from it, and stop it here. Look down again. The hallway version of her, the one who laughed, who pushed, who dominated, felt far away now. This version of her felt unsure. I didn't think it would go this far, she admitted quietly. Keisha nodded. That's how it always starts, swallowed. I was just messing around at first. Shifted slightly in her seat, her eyes narrowing just a little. That wasn't messing around, she said. Madison looked at her, and for the first time she didn't argue. I know, she said. The room fell silent again because that was new. Madison's father exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. All right, he muttered. Let's just wait for the district representative and handle this properly. Inside, even he knew something had already changed, something he couldn't undo. A knock came at the door, sharp, firm. Everyone turned. The principal walked over and opened it. A woman stepped inside, holding a folder, her expression serious and focused. She looked around the room quickly, taking in every face, every detail, every bit of tension still lingering in the air. Good afternoon, she said. I'm here from the district office. Her presence was different, professional, unemotional. The kind of person who dealt in facts, not feelings. We'll begin immediately, she continued, stepping further into the room. I'll need to review all evidence and hear statements from everyone involved. Shifted again, her confidence slipping further. Her father stepped closer to her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. But this time, it didn't feel like protection. It felt like uncertainty. The district representative turned to the principal. Do you have the video? Yes, he said, handing over the phone. She watched it carefully, silently. The entire room waited as the footage played once more, every second dragging longer than the last. When it ended, she looked up. Her eyes moved from Madison to Aaliyah to Keisha, then she closed the folder slowly. Seen enough to begin preliminary conclusions, she said. Madison's heart pounded. What happens now? Her father asked. The representative paused for a brief moment before answering. What happens next, she said, depends on what's said in the next few minutes. That made no sense at first, but then she added, I need to know if there is accountability. The word echoed, accountability, not punishment, not discipline, something deeper. She looked directly at Madison. Do you accept responsibility for what you did? The room held its breath, because this was the moment, the turning point. Madison opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes flickered toward her father, then toward Aaliyah. Then finally toward Keisha, and whatever she saw there made her hesitate, because deep down she knew whatever she said next would change everything. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. Every second felt heavier than the last as Madison stood there, caught between two versions of herself, the one she had always been and the one she was being forced to face. The district representative didn't rush her. She simply waited, calm, still, watching. Do you accept responsibility for what you did? The question echoed again in Madison's mind, louder this time, like it refused to be ignored. Madison's father shifted slightly beside her. Think carefully, he said under his breath, his voice low enough that only she could hear. You don't have to say anything right now. That wasn't entirely true. Everyone in the room knew it. This moment demanded something. And for the first time in her life, Madison couldn't talk her way out of it. Her chest tightened. Her thoughts raced. Part of her wanted to deny everything again, to push the blame somewhere else, to protect herself the way she always had. But another part, a quieter part, kept replaying the video in her head, the punch, the shove, the way Aaliyah hit the floor, the way she had looked. And then the way she looked now, not scared, not broken, just standing. Madison swallowed hard. Her voice came out small. The word barely left her lips, but it was enough. The entire room felt it. I did it, she added, a little stronger this time. I started it. A deep silence followed, but this time it wasn't tense. It was different, real. The district representative gave a small nod, writing something down in her folder. Thank you, she said. That matters. Madison's father exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping just a little. He didn't interrupt this time. He couldn't, not anymore. The representative turned to Aaliyah. Do you want to say anything? Aaliyah looked up for a moment. It seemed like she might stay quiet again, like she had so many times before. But then she stood, her movements steady, her voice calm. "I just wanted to come to school and be left alone," she said. "I didn't do anything to deserve what happened." Her words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They landed exactly where they needed to. Madison looked down again, her face tightening. "I know," she said quietly. Keisha watched both of them, her expression unreadable, but there was something softer in her eyes now. The district representative closed her folder. "Based on the evidence and the admission of responsibility," she began, "this case will move forward with disciplinary action. Suspension will be enforced immediately, and a formal review will determine further consequences." Madison nodded slightly. She didn't argue, she didn't protest, because now she understood at least a little. "But," the representative continued, "there is also an opportunity here." That caught everyone's attention. She looked directly at Madison. "Accountability is the first step. The next step is change." Madison frowned slightly. "Change how?" The representative gestured lightly toward Keisha. "That depends on whether you're willing to learn." Madison hesitated, then glanced at Keisha again. There was no anger there, no threat. Just expectation. "I don't know how," Madison admitted. And that was the most honest thing she had said all day. Keisha finally stepped forward again, not as an opponent, not as someone standing against her, but as someone standing in front of her. "You start by understanding what you did," she said. Madison nodded faintly. "I hurt her." "Yes," Keisha said, "but it's deeper than that." Looked confused, Keisha continued. "You tried to take her dignity. You tried to make her feel small so you could feel bigger." The words hit hard because they were true. Madison's eyes dropped again. "I didn't think about it like that," she whispered. "That's the problem," Keisha said gently. "You didn't think." The room stayed quiet, no one interrupted, because this wasn't about punishment anymore. This was about something bigger. The district representative watched carefully, then nodded once. "This is the kind of outcome we hope for," she said. "Not just consequences, but understanding." Madison's father finally spoke, his voice quieter now, stripped of the authority he walked in with. "What happens next?" he asked. The representative answered calmly. "She will serve her suspension. There will be a formal record, and she will be required to attend behavioral sessions." Madison took a slow breath. It wasn't what she wanted, but it was what she deserved. Then slowly she turned toward Aaliyah. "I'm sorry," she said. This time it sounded different, not rushed, not forced, real. Aaliyah looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "I hear you," she said. "Not forgiveness, not yet, but something real." And just as it seemed like the moment was settling, Keisha spoke one last time. "This isn't the end." Everyone turned toward her. Madison's chest tightened slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked. Keisha's gaze remained steady. "It means this is where the real work begins." The words lingered, because something in her tone made it clear this lesson wasn't finished yet. The district representative's footsteps echoed softly as she gathered her folder. But nobody in the room truly moved on. Even though decisions had been made, even though consequences had been explained, the air still felt unfinished, like something important had not yet settled into place. Madison stood quietly beside her father now, no longer arguing, no longer fighting back, just existing in a strange space between pride and regret. Her eyes kept drifting toward Aaliyah, then away again, as if she didn't quite know where to rest her gaze anymore. Aaliyah sat back down slowly, her body relaxing in small layers, the pain still there but no longer the center of everything. For the first time since morning, she didn't feel like she was standing alone in a storm. Keisha remained standing, still calm, still steady, but her attention was no longer on the room as a whole. It was on Madison. The district representative spoke one last time before leaving. "The school will send official documentation home. Cooperate fully with the process." Principal nodded quickly. "Yes, of course." Then she was gone, the door closed softly behind her, and just like that the authority shifted back into the room again, but this time it felt different, smaller, more human. Madison's father finally broke the silence. "We'll comply with everything," he said, his voice lower now, less sharp. "But I still don't think this needed to go this far." Keisha turned her head slightly toward him. "That depends on how far it was allowed to go before today." Didn't respond immediately, because there was no clean answer to that. Madison shifted slightly. "Dad, can we just go?" Her voice was tired now, not defiant, just drained, but Keisha raised a hand gently. "Wait," she said. Both Madison and her father paused. Aaliyah looked up again. Even the principal stayed quiet. Keisha took a slow breath as if choosing her words carefully. "This doesn't end when you walk out that door," she said softly. Madison frowned slightly. "What do you mean now?" Keisha stepped forward just a little, not threatening, not controlling, but present. "You can leave this office and go back to your life," she said. "But if nothing inside you changes, then nothing outside of you will either." The words landed differently now, less like correction, more like warning and guidance mixed together. Madison looked down. "I already said I was sorry," she muttered. "I know," Keisha replied gently, "but apology is only the beginning." A silence followed. This one wasn't heavy, it was thoughtful. Madison swallowed. "Then what am I supposed to do?" That question hung there, honest, vulnerable, real. Keisha studied her for a moment, then her expression softened just slightly. "You learn," she said simply. Madison let out a short breath. "Learn what?" Keisha nodded toward Aaliyah. "You learn what it feels like to be on the other side of you." Shifted slightly but didn't speak. Madison stared at her for a long moment, this time really looking not as an opponent, not as someone below her, but as a person. And slowly something unfamiliar began to form in her expression, understanding mixed with discomfort, mixed with shame. "I didn't think she mattered that much," Madison admitted quietly, almost to herself. Aaliyah looked up at that. Keisha didn't interrupt, she let the words sit, because they were important. Madison continued, her voice shaking a little now. "I didn't think about how it would feel for her." Keisha nodded. "That's where it started," rubbed her arm slightly. Her confidence completely gone now. "I don't want to be like this." That was the first time she had said anything like that, and the room felt it. Aaliyah watched her carefully, not forgiving, not forgetting, but listening. Keisha stepped a little closer again, her tone steady but softer now. "Then don't stay like this," she said. Madison looked up. "How?" Keisha paused, and for the first time she didn't sound like someone correcting a mistake. She sounded like someone offering a path. "Choosing differently the next time you feel powerful," she said. "Because you will feel it again. But what you do with it, that's what defines you." Nodded slowly. For once she didn't have a comeback. Her father placed a hand lightly on her shoulder again, but this time it felt less like protection and more like grounding. "We'll handle this," he said quietly. Madison nodded again. Then she turned to Aaliyah one more time. "I'm sorry," she said again, and this time she didn't look away. Aaliyah studied her for a moment, then simply said, "Okay." Forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement, and that was enough for now. Madison took a slow breath, then looked at Keisha one last time. "You really know how to fight, don't you?" she asked quietly. A small pause, then Keisha gave a faint, almost unreadable smile. "Not the way you think," she said. Madison nodded slightly. And for the first time since the beginning of the day she believed her. As Madison and her father finally turned toward the door, the room felt like it was releasing a breath it had been holding for hours. But just before they stepped out, Keisha spoke once more, soft, clear, final. "Remember this feeling," she said. Madison stopped briefly but didn't turn back. "Because forgetting it is what got you here." Door opened, and they walked out, leaving behind a room that was no longer filled with chaos, but with something quieter, something heavier. Something that would stay long after everyone left. The hallway outside the office felt different now, not because it had changed, but because the people inside it had. Madison walked slowly beside her father, her steps quieter than before, her head slightly lowered as students who had once watched her with fear now watched her with something else entirely. Curiosity, uncertainty, and in some faces, disappointment. No one laughed. No one whispered loudly anymore. The story had already spread. Aaliyah stayed behind in the office for a moment longer, gathering her things. Her cheek was still slightly swollen, but her posture had changed completely from when the day began. She wasn't shrinking anymore. She wasn't trying to disappear, she was just present. Keisha stood beside her, watching as she picked up her books. "You okay?" Keisha asked softly. Aaliyah paused, then nodded. "Yeah, I think so." Was a silence between them, not uncomfortable, just full of everything that had happened. Aaliyah finally looked up at her mother. "You knew what you were doing in there." Keisha exhaled slowly, a faint hint of tiredness now breaking through her calm. "I knew what needed to be done." Aaliyah tilted her head slightly. "You scared them." That made Keisha pause for a second, then she gave a small, almost invisible smile. "I didn't come here to scare anyone." Raised an eyebrow. "It kind of looked like it." Keisha shook her head gently. "No. I came here to stop something before it followed you for the rest of your life." looked down for a moment thinking about that, then she asked quietly, "Do you think she'll really change?" Keisha didn't rush the answer. That question mattered too much for a quick response. "I think," she said carefully, "she saw something today she can't unsee." Aaliyah nodded slowly. Outside the office, Madison and her father stepped into the parking lot. The sunlight hit differently now, not brighter, just harsher. Madison stopped walking for a second, looking back at the school building. "Dad," she said quietly. He turned toward her. "What?" She hesitated. "I don't think I've ever been in trouble like this before." Her father sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You made a mistake, a serious one, but we'll deal with it." Shook her head slightly. "It doesn't feel like just a mistake." That made him pause. For the first time, he didn't immediately respond. Inside the school, Keisha and Aaliyah finally stepped into the hallway. Students were still there, but the energy had shifted completely. People moved aside now without being told, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Aaliyah noticed it, Keisha noticed it too, but neither of them said anything about it. They just walked together. As they reached the exit, Aaliyah stopped for a moment. She said softly. Keisha turned. "Yes." Aaliyah looked out toward the doors. "If you hadn't come today, what would have happened?" Keisha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You would have started believing no one would ever stand for you." Aaliyah swallowed. "That's what I was afraid of," she admitted. Keisha placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be afraid of that anymore." Nodded. Then they stepped outside. The air was warmer. The world felt bigger again. Behind them, the school continued its normal day as if nothing had happened, but something had shifted inside it anyway. And even though no announcement was made, no official statement given, everyone who witnessed it understood one thing clearly. Something had changed at Jefferson High. Not just punishment, not just discipline, but perspective. And somewhere in that same moment, Madison sat quietly in her car, staring at her hands, replaying everything in her mind over and over again. Not the anger, not the chaos, but the silence after it all ended, because that silence was louder than anything she had ever experienced. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the center of control anymore. She felt like someone who had to rebuild from the ground up. And as the car drove away, the story didn't feel like it was ending. It felt like it was beginning again, just in a different direction. That brings us to the end of this story. I'd love to know where you were watching from today. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe for more.